Captain Alex Thompson had hidden her true identity for 8 years, using voice modulators and disguises to serve as a male F-22 pilot. When Iran launched 50 ballistic missiles at civilian targets, only she and rookie pilot Jake Morrison remained in the sky. Some secrets can't survive when millions of lives hang in the balance. October 12, 2019, at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, brought the kind of crisis that military planners had nightmared about for decades. The massive facility home to U.S. Central Command's forward operations transformed from routine deployment hub into the epicenter of a regional war that threatened to engulf the entire Middle East. Alarm klaxons wailed across the base as intelligence reports confirmed the unthinkable. Iran had launched a coordinated ballistic missile strike against civilian targets in the UAE and Saudi Arabia, with 50 Shahab-3 missiles screaming toward population centers at Mach 3. The Patriot missile defense systems across the region were firing at maximum capacity, their interceptor missiles streaking skyward in desperate attempts to stop the incoming barrage. But the mathematics were brutal. 50 incoming missiles against a defense network designed to handle smaller, more limited attacks. Patriot batteries report 60% intercept probability, announced Major Rodriguez from the command center, his voice tight with the strain of coordinating a defense against an unprecedented attack. That leaves 20 missiles getting through to civilian targets. The implications were catastrophic. Dubai alone had 3.5 million residents, most of whom had no idea that death was approaching at 3 times the speed of sound. Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, and other major cities faced similar threats, with millions of innocent lives hanging in the balance. All available F-22s are airborne, reported Colonel Martinez, the base commander. We're attempting high-altitude intercepts, but ballistic missiles are a different beast than aircraft. Our pilots are flying into uncharted territory. The F-22 Raptor, America's most advanced fighter jet, had never been designed for ballistic missile interception. The mission required flying at extreme altitudes, engaging targets moving at hypersonic speeds, and executing maneuvers that pushed both aircraft and pilot beyond their design limits. 24 F-22 Raptors had launched from bases across the region in a desperate attempt to intercept the remaining missiles before they could reach their targets. The pilots were flying a mission that existed more in theory than practice, using air-to-air missiles and cannon fire to destroy ballistic missiles in flight. Captain Alex Thompson was among them, her F-22 climbing toward the edge of space where the intercept attempts would take place. For 8 years, she had flown the most dangerous missions while hiding her true identity behind voice modulators, masculine clothing, and carefully constructed personas that allowed her to serve in roles officially closed to women. Captain Alexandra Petrov had become Alex Thompson in 2011 when the CIA recruited her for deep cover operations that required her to serve as a male pilot in combat units where women were not officially allowed. Her father, a Russian test pilot who had defected to the United States in 1995, had taught her to fly before she could drive, instilling in her both the technical skills and the psychological toughness needed for the most demanding aviation missions. The deception required constant vigilance voice modulators that changed her speech patterns, specially designed flight suits that disguised her figure, and behavioral modifications that allowed her to blend seamlessly into male-dominated military units. For 8 years, she had been one of the Air Force's most effective pilots while maintaining a secret that could have ended her career instantly. "Raptor flight, this is Control," came the voice of the air traffic controller as the F-22s approached their intercept altitude. "Targets are at Angel's 80 speed, Mach 3 and climbing. You are cleared to engage." Alexandra's response came through her voice modulator, the electronic device that had allowed her to maintain her cover for nearly a decade. "Control Raptor lead copies. Beginning intercept sequence." The engagement began at 80,000 feet, where the air was so thin that the F-22s were operating at the very edge of their performance envelope. The ballistic missiles appeared on radar as fast-moving blips that required split-second timing and perfect positioning to intercept. "Fox 3," called out Captain Williams as he fired an AIM-120 AMRAAM missile at one of the incoming threats. The missile streaked upward, its sophisticated guidance system attempting to track a target moving faster than anything it had been designed to engage. The battle was unlike anything in aviation history. Fighter jets attempting to intercept ballistic missiles in the thin air of the upper atmosphere, where a single mistake could mean death for the pilot and disaster for millions of civilians below. One by one, the F-22s engaged the incoming missiles with mixed success. Some intercepts were successful, with ballistic missiles exploding in brilliant fireballs that lit up the sky. Others failed, with the hypersonic targets proving too fast or too maneuverable for conventional air-to-air weapons. "Raptor 7 is down," came the desperate radio call as another F-22 was destroyed either by missile fragments or by the extreme stresses of high-altitude combat. As the aerial battle continued, the cost in American aircraft and pilots became staggering. The F-22s, despite being the world's most advanced fighter jets, were being pushed beyond their design limits in an attempt to intercept weapons they had never been intended to engage. "Raptor 3 engine failure, I'm going down," transmitted Captain Johnson as his aircraft's engine flamed out from the extreme altitude and stress of the intercept attempts. "Raptor 12 hydraulic failure, ejecting," called another pilot as his aircraft became uncontrollable at 75,000 feet. Alexandra watched her fellow pilots disappear from the radio frequency one by one, their aircraft either shot down by missile fragments or disabled by the extreme conditions of high-altitude combat. The mission that had begun with 24 aircraft was rapidly becoming a disaster that would leave the remaining ballistic missiles free to reach their civilian targets. "Control Raptor lead," Alexandra transmitted her voice modulator, masking the emotion in her voice. "We're down to 2 aircraft. Raptor lead and Raptor 24 are the only birds still flying." Lieutenant Jake Morrison, flying as Raptor 24, was a 26-year-old pilot fresh from training who had never seen combat before today. The weight of stopping 8 remaining ballistic missiles now rested on 2 pilots, one hiding her identity, the other barely qualified for the mission. Lieutenant Jake Morrison's voice crackled through the radio with barely controlled panic as he watched his radar display showing 8 ballistic missiles still racing toward Dubai at Mach 3. The young pilot had graduated from flight school just 6 months earlier and had never faced anything more challenging than routine training exercises. "Raptor lead, this is 24." Morrison transmitted, his voice shaking despite his efforts to maintain military composure. "I don't think I can do this. These missiles are moving too fast, and I've never attempted an intercept at this altitude." Alexandra could hear the fear in Morrison's voice and understood that the young pilot was on the verge of psychological collapse. The weight of 3.5 million civilian lives was crushing him, and without her guidance, he would be unable to function effectively in the remaining minutes before the missiles reached their targets. 24. This is lead, Alexandra replied through her voice modulator, trying to project calm confidence. Stay with me. We're going to get through this together. But Morrison's response revealed the depth of his crisis. Lead, I don't even know who you are. Your call sign isn't in any of the briefing materials, and your voice sounds different. How do I know I can trust you? Alexandra faced an impossible choice as she realized that Morrison's psychological state was deteriorating rapidly. The young pilot was questioning her authority and identity at the worst possible moment when clear communication and absolute trust were essential for mission success. Her voice modulator, which had protected her secret for 8 years, was now becoming a barrier to the kind of leadership that Morrison needed. The electronic distortion that had allowed her to serve as a male pilot was preventing her from establishing the human connection necessary to guide a panicking aviator through an impossible mission. 24, you need to follow my lead, Alexandra insisted, but she could hear Morrison's breathing becoming more rapid and shallow over the radio classic signs of hyperventilation and panic that would make him useless in combat. I can't do this, Morrison finally broke, his voice cracking with terror. I'm a rookie pilot trying to stop nuclear missiles. This is insane. Alexandra realized that maintaining her cover would mean watching Morrison collapse psychologically and allowing 8 ballistic missiles to reach civilian targets. The secret she had protected for 8 years was now standing between her and saving millions of lives. With 4 minutes remaining before the missiles reached Dubai, Alexandra made the most difficult decision of her military career. She reached up and switched off the voice modulator that had hidden her identity for 8 years, then keyed her radio microphone. Jake, she said, her natural feminine voice cutting through the radio static with startling clarity, my name is Alexandra Petrov, and I'm going to teach you how to save those people. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Morrison's aircraft continued flying in formation, but no response came through the radio as the young pilot processed what he had just heard. You're a woman. Morrison finally transmitted, his voice filled with shock and confusion. How is that possible? Women aren't allowed in F-22 squadrons. It's a long story that I'll explain later, Alexandra replied, her voice now carrying the authority and warmth that the modulator had stripped away. Right now, I need you to listen to me and do exactly what I say. Those missiles will hit Dubai in 3.5 minutes, and we're the only thing standing between them and 3.5 million innocent people. With her identity revealed and precious seconds ticking away, Alexandra began the most intensive flight training session in aviation history. She had to teach Morrison a maneuver that even experienced pilots found difficult while both of them flew at 80,000 feet in pursuit of hypersonic missiles. Jake, we're going to perform something called a cobra maneuver. Alexandra explained, her voice now carrying the confidence and expertise that had made her one of the Air Force's most effective pilots. It's a technique my father taught me. He was a Russian test pilot who knew how to make aircraft do impossible things. The cobra maneuver was an extreme aviation technique that involved pulling the aircraft's nose up so sharply that it essentially stopped forward motion while maintaining altitude, allowing the pilot to fire at targets that would otherwise be impossible to engage. "I can't do that," Morrison protested. "That maneuver will stall the engines and probably kill us both." "Jake," Alexandra said firmly, "those missiles are carrying nuclear warheads. If we don't stop them, millions of people will die. The Cobra maneuver is dangerous, but it's the only way to get close enough to use our cannons effectively. The technique would require Morrison to fly his F-22 beyond its design limits while engaging targets moving at 3 times the speed of sound. With less than 3 minutes remaining before the missiles reached Dubai, Alexandra and Morrison had to execute the most dangerous aviation maneuver ever attempted in combat. The Cobra maneuver required them to fly directly toward the incoming ballistic missiles, pull their aircraft into an extreme nose-up attitude that would nearly stall their engines, and use their 20-millimeter cannons to destroy nuclear warheads at a range of less than 500 meters. "Jake, follow my lead," Alexandra transmitted as she positioned her F-22 for the intercept. "We're going to approach the missiles head-on, then execute the Cobra when I give the signal. You'll have maybe 2 seconds to fire before we have to recover, or we'll stall and crash." Morrison's breathing was audible over the radio as he struggled to control his fear. "Alexandra, I've never done anything like this. What if I mess up and hit you instead of the missile?" "You won't," Alexandra replied with absolute confidence. "I can hear it in your voice. You're scared, but you're focused. That's exactly what we need right now." The first missile appeared on their radar, a fast-moving blip that represented death for hundreds of thousands of people if they failed to stop it. Alexandra's F-22 accelerated toward the target, with Morrison following in tight formation as they prepared to attempt something that existed more in theory than practice. "Cobra now," Alexandra commanded, as she pulled her F-22's nose up into an extreme attitude that caused her engines to flame out momentarily. The maneuver was so violent that she felt her vision graying from the G-forces, but her aircraft's nose was now pointed directly at the incoming missile. Her 20-millimeter cannon fired a burst of depleted uranium rounds that streaked toward the ballistic missile at nearly point-blank range. The rounds found their target, and the missile's nuclear warhead exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up the sky like a second sun. "I got it," Alexandra transmitted as she recovered from the Cobra maneuver, her engines restarting just in time to prevent a stall. "Jake, your turn. Next missile is coming in from your 2 o'clock. Morrison's F-22 executed the Cobra maneuver with surprising precision for a rookie pilot, his aircraft's nose coming up sharply as he lined up his cannon on the second missile. His burst was less accurate than Alexandra's, but several rounds found their target, and the second nuclear warhead detonated safely at altitude. "Outstanding," Alexandra called out. "You're getting the hang of this." But their celebration was short-lived, as radar showed 6 more missiles still inbound, and Morrison's aircraft was showing warning lights from the extreme stresses of the Cobra maneuver. As they engaged the remaining missiles, Alexandra's F-22 began showing signs of critical damage from the repeated extreme maneuvers and the shock waves from nuclear detonations. Her left engine was running rough, her hydraulic pressure was dropping, and her aircraft was becoming increasingly difficult to control. "Alexandra, your aircraft is trailing smoke," Morrison reported, his voice now steady and professional, as he had found his confidence through successful combat. "You need to eject before you lose complete control." "Negative," Alexandra replied, lining up on the 5th missile. We've got 3 more missiles to stop, and I'm not leaving you to handle them alone." Her final Cobra maneuver was executed with an aircraft that was barely flyable, but her cannon burst found its target, and the 5th nuclear warhead exploded harmlessly at altitude. However, the shock wave from the detonation caused her already damaged aircraft to suffer complete hydraulic failure. "Jake, you're on your own for the last 2, Alexandra transmitted as her F-22 began an uncontrollable descent. "Remember everything I taught you, trust your training, and trust yourself." Morrison's response showed how much he had grown in the past few minutes. "Alexandra, I've got this. You taught me well. Now get out of that aircraft before it kills you." As Alexandra ejected from her dying F-22, she watched Morrison execute 2 perfect Cobra maneuvers, destroying the final missiles and saving millions of lives. Alexandra's ejection seat fired with explosive force, launching her clear of her disintegrating F-22, just as the aircraft's remaining engine exploded. The parachute deployment at 60,000 feet was violent and disorienting, but she was alive and conscious as she began her long descent toward the Qatari desert. Through her helmet radio, she could hear Morrison engaging the final 2 missiles with the confidence and skill that their brief but intense training session had instilled in him. The young pilot, who had been paralyzed by fear just minutes earlier, was now executing complex combat maneuvers with the precision of a veteran. "Fox 4, Fox 4. Morrison transmitted as his cannon destroyed the 7th missile. "1 more to go." Alexandra watched from her parachute as Morrison's F-22 performed its final Cobra maneuver, the aircraft pulling into an impossible attitude as the pilot lined up his shot on the last ballistic missile. The cannon burst was perfect, and the final nuclear warhead exploded harmlessly at altitude, its brilliant flash visible even in the bright desert sunlight. All missiles destroyed. Morrison transmitted his voice filled with exhaustion and triumph. "Dubai is safe." Alexandra's parachute carried her down through the thin desert air for nearly 20 minutes, giving her time to process what had just happened. For 8 years, she had hidden her identity to serve her country in roles that were officially denied to women. Today, she had been forced to reveal that identity to save millions of lives. The landing in the Qatari desert was hard, but survivable, with Alexandra rolling to absorb the impact as her parachute collapsed around her. The silence of the desert was profound after the chaos of high-altitude combat, broken only by the distant sound of search and rescue helicopters approaching her position. As she gathered her parachute and activated her emergency beacon, Alexandra realized that her life as Alex Thompson was over. There would be no returning to the carefully constructed masculine persona that had allowed her to serve in secret for nearly a decade. The rescue helicopter arrived within 30 minutes, its crew having tracked Alexandra's descent through radar and emergency beacon signals. As the aircraft settled onto the desert sand, she could see the surprised expressions of the rescue crew when they realized that the pilot they were recovering was a woman. "Ma'am," said the crew chief as he helped Alexandra aboard the helicopter, "we were told we were picking up Captain Thompson. Are you his wife?" Alexandra's response was simple and direct. "I am Captain Thompson, or rather I was. My real name is Alexandra Petrov, and I've been serving under deep cover for the past 8 years." The revelation sent shock waves through the rescue crew, but their professionalism took over as they provided medical attention and began the flight back to Al Udeid Air Base. Alexandra knew that her arrival would trigger a series of debriefings, investigations, and revelations that would change her life forever. Al Udeid Air Base was in chaos when Alexandra's rescue helicopter touched down on the flight line. News of the successful missile intercepts had spread throughout the base, but the revelation that one of the pilots was a woman serving under deep cover had created a sensation that reached the highest levels of command. General Martinez, the base commander, was waiting on the tarmac, along with a crowd of personnel who had gathered to see the pilot who had helped save millions of lives. But when Alexandra stepped off the helicopter still wearing her flight suit, but with her helmet removed to reveal her long brown hair, the crowd fell silent. Captain Petrov, General Martinez said, using her real name for the first time in public, on behalf of the United States Air Force and the millions of people whose lives you saved today, thank you. The general's words carried special weight because Alexandra realized that he had known her true identity all along. The deep cover operation had required approval and oversight from the highest levels of command, and Martinez had been protecting her secret while allowing her to serve with distinction. What followed was unlike anything in military history. The public recognition of a pilot who had served with distinction while hiding her gender for 8 years. The story captured international attention as news outlets struggled to understand how a woman had managed to serve in combat roles that were officially closed to female personnel. Ladies and gentlemen, General Martinez announced during the hastily arranged press conference, Captain Alexandra Petrov has just completed one of the most successful air-to-air intercept missions in military history. Her actions, along with those of Lieutenant Morrison, prevented a nuclear attack on civilian targets that could have killed millions of people. The questions from reporters were immediate and intense, focusing on how Alexandra had managed to maintain her cover for so long and what her revelation meant for military policies regarding women in combat roles. When Alexandra finally had the opportunity to speak, her words were measured and thoughtful, reflecting the weight of what she had experienced and what her revelation meant for the future. For 8 years, I hid my identity, not because I was ashamed of being a woman, but because I wanted to be judged on my skills and abilities rather than my gender. She said, facing the cameras with the same courage she had shown in combat. Today, I'm proud to serve as a female pilot, and I hope that my story will help open doors for other women who want to serve their country in combat roles. Her statement was broadcast around the world, inspiring women in military services across the globe and sparking debates about gender equality in combat positions that would continue for years to come. The pilot, who had hidden her identity for 8 years, had become a symbol of both the barriers that women faced in military service and the exceptional capabilities they could demonstrate when given the opportunity to serve. Alexandra's revelation and her heroic actions during the missile crisis sparked immediate and far-reaching changes in military policy regarding women in combat roles. Her 8 years of successful service, while disguised as a male pilot, provided irrefutable evidence that gender was not a determining factor in combat effectiveness. Within 6 months, the Air Force had opened all pilot positions to women, including the most elite fighter squadrons that had previously been restricted to male personnel. Alexandra's story became a case study in military academies worldwide, demonstrating how artificial barriers based on gender could prevent the military from utilizing its most capable personnel. The Petrov Protocols were established to ensure that future integration of women into combat roles would be based on merit and capability, rather than outdated assumptions about gender limitations. Her success proved that the most important qualities for combat pilots' intelligence, courage, and technical skill had nothing to do with gender. Alexandra received the Medal of Honor for her actions during the missile crisis, becoming the first woman to receive the nation's highest military decoration for aerial combat. The ceremony was attended by world leaders who recognized that her actions had prevented a nuclear catastrophe that could have destabilized the entire Middle East. But perhaps more meaningful to Alexandra was the letter she received from Lieutenant Morrison, who had gone on to become one of the Air Force's most skilled pilots. "You didn't just save millions of lives that day," he wrote. "You taught me that courage comes in many forms, and that the best leaders are those who can inspire others to exceed their own expectations." Alexandra continued to serve with distinction, eventually reaching the rank of colonel and commanding her own fighter wing. Throughout her career, she mentored young pilots of all genders, teaching them that excellence in aviation required dedication, skill, and the courage to push beyond perceived limitations. The story of Captain Alexandra Petrov became legendary within aviation circles, inspiring a generation of women to pursue careers as military pilots. Her 8 years of hidden service demonstrated that capability and courage were not determined by gender, while her revelation during the missile crisis showed that true leadership required the willingness to sacrifice personal secrets for the greater good. Her legacy extended beyond military service, becoming a symbol of how artificial barriers could prevent organizations from utilizing their most talented personnel. The pilot who had hidden her identity for 8 years had ultimately revealed that the most important identity was that of a skilled professional dedicated to serving others.